major development. Hamas Gaza chief has said that the group is ready to immediately negotiate a deal, and that is, the deal would be around to release all hostages in exchange for an agreed number of Palestinians imprisoned in Israel as a part of a broader agreement to end the war in Gaza. Now, in a televised speech, Khalil Al-Hayya, who heads the Hamas negotiating team in indirect talks with Israel, said that the group rejected a temporary truce and instead backed a broader proposal. According to Hayya, Hamas has accepted a plan proposed by mediators Egypt and Qatar, which involves releasing some hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners, followed by talks on the next phase of the ceasefire that includes a complete end to the war and withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza. Let's listen in to what exactly was said first before we delve deeper into this subject.
Hamas movement is ready to immediately negotiate a deal to swap all hostages with an agreed number of Palestinians jailed by Israel, to end completely the war against our people and to fully withdraw from Gaza Strip and to start the reconstruction in Gaza. Netanyahu and his government use partial agreements as a cover for their political agenda, which is based on continuing the war of extermination and starvation.
القائمة على استمرار الحرب والإبادة والتجويع حتى لو كان الثمن.
Even if the price is sacrificing all his hostages, we will not be part of passing this policy.
Now, Egyptian mediators have been trying to revive the January ceasefire deal that briefly paused hostilities but later collapsed. However, talks now remain deadlocked, with both Hamas and Israel blaming each other for the impasse. These are the latest developments and details into what has been said by the Hamas representatives. And at this given point, remember earlier itself, last year, towards the end of 2024, there was already a negotiation that was being looked at, which was being mediated by both Egypt and Qatar. In fact, the United States also played an active role in mediating the situation between both these particular countries. But at this given point, we had seen that even months after we had seen the first phase of that very ceasefire deal successfully having seen the release of 3 hostages, there seemed to be a deadlock of a situation arising and approaching at that given point, where beyond a point, attacks still continued on Gaza despite a ceasefire deal having been spoken of. And what the Hamas representatives have said is that that very ceasefire deal, which was partial in its own way, was more of a political move that was being, in fact, taken up, that was being executed by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to also be able to diplomatically deal with the situation, where he was seen negotiating with Hamas as mediated by Egypt, Qatar, as well as United States, keeping their interests in mind as well. But at the same time, the war continued waging on despite the ceasefire deal having been spoken of, and in fact, first phase also having been implemented. With that, let's discuss this on a greater depth with Major General Sudhakar Ji, retired defense and strategic expert, who's joining us at this point in the bulletin to bring us more insights as to what exactly are we expecting in the coming days. Major General Ji, thank you so much for speaking to us at this point on News9. Very firstly, do help us understand. We understand that Hamas has, number one, rejected another partial agreement that the Israeli Prime Minister, or rather the Israeli authorities, were trying to push down. But at the same time, they've come out to say that we will agree for a total hostage release and in exchange for prisoners, of course, and that will only be done if the war ends. The question here is, will Israel indeed be willing to do this? Will Israel be actually agreeing for a total ceasefire, and that too an immediate one?
Thank you for getting me to your show. Compliments to News9 for having picked up this breaking news so fast and so early. I don't think any mainstream channel in India is covering this. As regards your question, it's $1 million. It is anybody's guess. But my take as a student of geopolitics, strategy and security is that I look at things from the perspective of immediate, midterm, and long term. Long term, when I look at a time frame of 2 to 5 years, or maybe even longer than that. Medium term, maybe 1 to 2 years. Short term is what you are asking. You are keen to know as to will there be some kind of a ceasefire to this mindless conflict. I I somehow I'm very skeptical about the outcome. However, being a soldier without hope, there is no objective in life. Things are all meaningless. So I'm quite optimistic. Let's hope for the best. At least for good and for a change, the global order is talking about peace, is talking about harmony, is talking about ceasefire. This conflict has no meaning. Diplomacy and dialogue are the only two tools which India, as the center of gravity or the pivot between the west and the east and north and the south, is stitching it very well in a consistent and coherent manner, is the philosophy which should be adopted. So having said that, now let's take it point by point. First and foremost thing, you have brought out that uh, there was a partial kind of an agreement and it was declined, it was turned down by relevant stakeholder. Now the agreement has come and Hamas has agreed to release all the hostages. At the same time, you see the response. The Israel is full bent, although I understand as a military man that all these are pressure techniques in order to make Hamas release. That is the central point of negotiation at the moment for Netanyahu. And once the hostages are released, there is every possibility of the ceasefire beginning in some form. But at the same time, it will do good to the global order. Somebody amongst the interlocutors, be it Egypt or Qatar or someone from USA, because I know Netanyahu, being a military man, he won't listen to Egypt and Qatar. Maybe if Donald Trump talks to him, this is a stage of sensitivity. It will do good to him, do good to the Middle East, do good to the international order if he refrains making provocative statements. A statement like, even if they're at the cost of the lives of hostages, they will actually ramen, they will hammer the Hamas thoroughly and they will decimate them. Words to that effect. These are very provocative and these are counterproductive and detrimental to the overall orientation of ceasefire. Second point, he knows that many of the hostages have passed away, and there are far and few who are alive today. So he's resolved on one hand as the political leader of Israel is one thing, but the objective, the hidden objective that he has is not actually the release of the hostages. The hidden objective, maybe overtly, it might have come out in open media in many forms, is basically to channelize all the efforts, war-making efforts, to put Iran in its place, along with the support of USA, to prevent Iran going nuclear, to ensure that in the long term they have a regime change in Iran, to ensure that the Middle East is dominated by none other than Israel. What is Israel? Let's understand, go back in historical perspective. Very briefly, Shreya, Israel to me is something like a satellite or an outpost of USA. So, having said this much, I am sure people who are alive to the realities and the turn of events will understand that yes, the need of the hour is in some form we need to bring about ceasefire. The need of the hour is to talk it out with the interlocutors. After the ceasefire, there has to be a long term, a peace plan. Peace will come about only if the conflict comes to some kind of an end. And thereafter is the rehabilitation of the reconstruction of Gaza Strip, which I'm afraid, with the new ideas being toyed as Rivera of Middle East and all, it will further ignite, it will trigger, it is a potential trigger for Palestinians to wage their movement of rebellion for securing their land, for livelihood and also for habitation. This is the strong point. Two nation theory, which was agreed many, many years back, is only concept, not only a concept, but it is the only pragmatic solution to the ongoing conflict. However, let me, in the end, just remind our or the audience that way back in 1997, if I remember, there was a doctrine kind of a document which came out after extensive deliberation. Netanyahu happened to be a member in that. Senators were there. Both, it was a bipartisan committee, the Democrats as also the Republicans. It was a clean break. Yes, I remember the name of the document, the heading was clean break. The essence, it was running into number of pages. The essence of this document was that Middle East will not have any Palestinian in the existing land. They will be relocated. So, a concept, hidden concept like this doesn't actually augur well for ceasefire and peace and lasting peace that I'm talking of. Therefore, it has to be not only transparent, but it has to address the aspirations of the relevant stakeholders. Hamas also have to give a kind of an undertaking and understanding to Iran, because Hamas is what? Hamas is an extension. It is the octopus, one of the tentacles of the octopus head, that is Iran. Same is the case with Hezbollah. Same is the case with the Houthis. So therefore, Iran is the central point, which has to be convinced. So the ongoing talk is doing well. It is progressing very well. And I'm very optimistic as a soldier that in days ahead, there will be some substantive and meaningful progressive development towards peace and harmony, and the start point of which will be the beginning of a ceasefire. Back to you, Shreya.
Yes, Major General, I think you have summed it up very, very well at this given point, because I think you've covered it all and from all different aspects. But yes, while there are challenges, while there are several episodes of ceasefire talks that we have already witnessed, I think at the end of the day, one only needs to be optimistic that yes, the leaders do actually, and more importantly, the Prime Minister of Israel does actually agree to some sort of a ceasefire, and an immediate one at that, and definitely a hostage prisoner exchange also takes place. Now, one is only hopeful that this particular episode of this very ceasefire talk, where the Hamas has come out to agree that yes, they will release all hostages if prisoners are exchanged and a complete ceasefire is attained immediately, I think that definitely does give hope at this given point. Major General Sudhakarji, thank you so much for speaking to us at News9 on this very crucial story that we're tracking at the very top of this very bulletin.